Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the HOA, which joined me without my permission. I woke up to a string of honks, the type that says, "We've got a schedule and you're in the way." At first I thought it was a hay delivery arriving early. Then I heard a squeal, like a trailer taking the gravel ruts too fast. And my border collie, Piper, shot off the couch where she sleeps when I forget to shoo her off. I slipped on my boots and stepped onto the porch, mug in hand, and saw a line of cars nosed up to my gate like geese to a park bench. SUVs with decals in the back windows, a couple of shiny sedans, one pickup topped with helium balloons. The lead vehicle, a white crossover with a magnetic sign that read "Event Coordination," had backed up just enough so the driver could gesture at me like I was the one unprepared for their arrival. My farm isn't big by farm standards, but compared to the shoebox lots across the county road, it's a blanket spread out on a little hill. The pool came with the property, an old concrete gym the former owners tiled in blue to match the sky. There's a rough cedar gazebo next to it, big enough to shade a dozen folding chairs, and a brick walkway that looks prettier than it is practical. I've repeated this line to myself 100 times. It's private property, fully fenced, with posted signs every 50 feet that call it what it is. My land, my rules, no uninvited entry. Out at the gate stood a woman in a pastel blazer, her nose tilted just so, chin lifted like she was weighing whether I'd pass inspection. A man with a clipboard and two young guys unloading a 10x20 pop-up tent had already slid the gate latch halfway up from the outside, meaning they'd reached over or used a stick. That was strike 1 and 2. The woman waved like we were dear friends. "Morning," she sang out. "We're right on time. Where should the caterer park?" I felt that odd, slow heat climb from my collarbone to my ears. The one that starts when something doesn't make sense, but you know you're about to be roped into making sense of it. "Caterer for what?" I asked, setting the mug on the post. Her smile didn't dim a notch. "For the anniversary party, of course. We spoke with your board. They said you'd be difficult, but we handled the certificate of insurance and everything. The association is thrilled you're lending your pool and gazebo. 30 years of community, what a milestone." "Hold up," I said. "What board? There's no board here. I've got chickens, not a board." She made a tisk sound that would have snipped a ribbon in half. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said. "I'm Mitzi, president. We've emailed." She tried the gate again. "It's a bit sticky." "The gate sticks for people who don't belong on the other side of it," I said. "Mitzi, right? I'm not part of your group. I told you that when you showed up last month with a welcome packet and a form for dues." Her smile went from incandescent to fluorescent. "Don't start this," she said, lower voice now, private voice. "The annexation was approved. Your parcel is on the membership list. It would be unbecoming to make a fuss in front of the vendors." I blinked. Piper sat at my heel, ears pointed like little triangles of lightning. "Mitzi, the day you brought that packet I told you to leave. You tried to slide a paper under my gate about an annexation, and I said very clearly my land was not and would never be part of your covenant. I wasn't part of it when I bought the farm, and that's not how it works. You know that. Times change," she said. "Communities evolve. It's the HOA's anniversary and the board voted. Important people are coming. You don't want to be on the wrong side of that." I could feel the coffee cooling in my throat. I set my hand on the top rail of the gate and spoke slowly. "You're not unloading a single tent pole. You're not parking a single car. You're not stepping 1 foot on my side. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's not happening here." Mitzi pulled her phone out. "If you're going to be uncooperative," she said, already scrolling, "I'll get someone who can explain this to you." She held the phone to her ear and turned a fraction away, but she didn't lower her voice. "Yes, I'd like to report a disturbance," she said. "We have a member refusing to comply with a scheduled community event and preventing access." The two young guys holding the tent legs looked at each other and froze. Clipboard guy cleared his throat and suddenly cared a lot about his shoelace. She hung up and announced to the cars behind, 10 minutes. Then to me, "When they get here, you'll open the gate." "Now you wait," I said, keeping my voice even. "You called the police to make them drag me into hosting your party? On my property?" I tapped the metal sign welded to the gate. "No trespass. This isn't complicated." She pointed toward my pool, visible past the barn through the cottonwoods. "It's a perfect venue," she said, like that sealed it. By then my neighbor Harper had wandered up from her side of the road, drawn by the commotion. Harper is a retired nurse who knows the exact right time to show up with either brownies or a stern look. She took in the balloons, the tent, me in my boots and old college hoodie with the sleeves pushed up. "Morning," she said. "Is this a parade?" Should I bring a folding chair? The association is having its anniversary party here, Mitzi said, sugarcoating slipping. It's been approved. Harper raised an eyebrow so hard it might have snapped. On his land? Honey, nothing out here is approved unless he says so. Mitzi sucked a lemon in one breath and said, as of last month, his land is in the association. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out wrong, edged. Mitzi, do you even hear yourself? Piper barked once as if to say, seconded. The first cruiser rolled up, county sheriff's office, because we don't have city police out here. Lights off. Just a smooth, serious approach. Deputy Lane, who looks like he was molded for a uniform but keeps a soft voice, got out and nodded to everyone like he'd walked into a polite picnic, not a standoff. Morning, he said. What's the situation? Mitzi moved quickly, credibility jumping into her stride. Officer, thanks for coming. The association scheduled an event here. We have everything arranged. He's refusing to open his gate and is causing a disturbance with the vendors. Deputy Lane looked at me. He knows me in that small-town law way. You meet at pancake breakfasts, and you nod on the road. You hosting something today? He asked. No, sir, I said. They're trying to set up on my land without my permission. I told them to leave. They've reached over my gate. They've put hands on my property. It's entirely private. I'm not part of their association, never have been, never will be. Mitzi's voice carried from shoulder height. He is, though, she said. We annexed his parcel. It's in our records. He's refusing to comply with board decisions. Deputy Lane did that tiny inhale that cops do when they're sorting what's actually enforceable from what's just noise. Annexed? He asked. Ma'am, you can't annex someone's property into a homeowners association without their consent. That's a civil issue either way. But what I need to know is simple. Do you have the owner's permission to be on his land? Mitzi took a step toward the gate, offended into bravery. We don't need his permission. He's a member. Our bylaws cover shared amenities. Deputy Lane held up a palm. No, he said. That's not how this is going to work. This is private property. If the owner says you can't come in, you can't come in. If you do, that's trespassing. Now, if you have a document that changes that, you're welcome to show it to me. Mitzi unlocked her phone, swiped and scrolled, produced a PDF on the screen. She held it out like a sword. Deputy Lane took it, pinched and zoomed, then handed it back. This looks like a list, he said. It's not a court order, it's not a deed, it's not even a signed agreement. It's our membership list, she said, updated. The board approved it. Ma'am, he said softly now, you don't get to redefine reality by vote. He turned to the tent guys. Fellas, I'd load that back up, he said. And if any of you reached over or touched the latch to this gate, don't do it again. The clipboard guy nodded like a bobblehead. The two young guys started collapsing the tent, hands quick, eyes wide. Mitzi's face went pink around the edges. This is inappropriate, she said, standing straighter. We reserved this space. The invoices have been paid. People are coming. That might be so, Deputy Lane said, but you didn't reserve this space. You can't. The man says no. That's the end of it. I felt a wash of relief so sudden my knees wanted to sit down. But I didn't. I kept my hands steady on the gate rail. Thank you, I said. Mitzi shifted tactics the way a dancer spins. Officer, we can move to the cul-de-sac, she said, pointing down the road toward the postage stamp park common area the HOA maintains for the neighborhood. But we'll need access through his lot to park on the grass. There isn't enough room on the street. Then there isn't enough room, he said. There was a quiet river between us after that. People in cars put down coffee cups and picked up phones, texting whoever invited them to the fiasco. The caterer's truck, late, pulled up behind the cruiser, saw the problem, and did a careful three-point turn back to the highway. Mitzi dialed again. Sable, she said when someone picked up. He's making a scene. Her mouth flattened. No, the sheriff is. Yes. No. Get the board down here now. She hung up tight. You're welcome to use the public road, Deputy Lane said calmly. But you're not crossing onto this property. If you try, you'll be cited. If you refuse to leave, you'll be arrested. Everyone here understands me. Clipboard guy swallowed hard. Yes, sir, he said and hustled his crew along. I'll be filing a complaint, Mitzi said. We'll see how you feel when the board issues fines. You can't find someone who isn't a member, I said, feeling stubbornness settle into my shoulders like a good jacket. But by all means, write me a letter. She lifted her chin. Oh, you'll get a letter, she said. They left in an orderly mess, cars staggering out, balloons bumping each other like thoughts in a crowded mind. Deputy Lane waited until the last vehicle had turned onto the road. He looked at me with the patience of a man who knows the next piece of the story is waiting behind my teeth. "You want to tell me the rest?" he asked. I let out the breath I'd been holding so long I forgot it was in there. "It started 2 weeks after I bought this place," I said. "Well, not started. More like got loud. I'll give you the short of the long as I explained it to him then. When I moved in, I met my neighbors across the road and learned about their association. Their neighborhood was platted decades after this little farmstead. A ring of nice homes with the usual covenants about paint colors and basketball hoops and where you can park a boat. The parcel map is clear. The HOA boundary stops at the property line on the far side of the county road. My farm is its own separate legal world, recorded years before those houses were imagined. I made a point of reading through all the paperwork when I closed. No covenants encumbering my land. No easements except an old irrigation right-of-way which runs underground like a secret. I bought a farm, not a membership. Mitzi, however, had other plans. 2 weeks after I moved in, she appeared at my gate with a binder. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, and tried to hand me a packet. I thanked her for the sentiment and declined. She pressed the point. "Everyone contributes," she said. "Fair is fair." I politely explained that I wasn't in their group. She sniffed. "That's not neighborly," she said, and left the binder on my fence post anyway. I returned it to her porch that evening with a note that said, "Not a member. Please don't leave materials on my property." They sent a welcome letter by mail addressed to owner. It included a schedule for pool maintenance and a gentle reminder about trash cans. 5 days later, I got an invoice for first quarter dues and a late fee. Like they'd backdated my membership to create an immediate problem. I ignored it. Then I got a notice of non-compliance for parking a flatbed trailer in common view. The photo attached showed my trailer on my gravel behind my barn, with my cows in the background as if they were witnesses. I dropped by their next board meeting. It was held in a garage with string lights and a folding table. I stood during the open comment period and said slowly, clearly, and politely, "My property is not part of your association. Your enforcement actions are inappropriate and must stop." Mitzi kept her lips together and smiled the way people do when they're telling you how inconvenient your facts are. "We'll take it under advisement," she said. A week later, I received an email from someone named Sable, who styled herself as Community Standards. She said the board had voted to annex adjacent parcels to protect property values, and my farm was first on the list. I replied that annexation required owner consent and appropriate filings I had no intention of signing. Sable wrote back with a PDF, an updated membership list, with my parcel number typed in at the bottom. It looked like a spreadsheet had been given a haircut and sent to prom as a legal document. A few days after that, 3 SUVs parked near my fence line and committee members walked my perimeter like I owed them a tour. One of them tried the latch to the gate. I came out and told them to leave, again politely, again firmly. "We're just taking measurements for the directory," Sable said, holding a tape measure like she planned to size up my gravel. "No," I said, and pointed to the no trespass sign, and then to the other sign that says, "All visitors check in at house." They left with disappointed faces and the energy of people certain they were being wronged by being told no. "I thought that was the end," I told Deputy Lane. "But then they sent the invitation for this thing." A glossy card had shown up 2 days before, slipped under my gate, no postage, my name spelled correctly for the first time. "Join us for 30 years of community," it said, in a font that curled like ribbon. "Hosted at the pool and gazebo, my pool. My gazebo." It listed times and a schedule for speeches. It named their past presidents, with Mitzi's name twice. It used the phrase "graciously offered," as if they were doing me the courtesy of saying I'd agreed. I sent an email to the board address on the card with one sentence. "This event is not happening on my property." No one responded. Deputy Lane shook his head, pushed his hat back with one finger, and exhaled. "Folks get spun up in these neighborhood groups," he said. "But the law doesn't care about their bylaws. If it's not in your deed and not recorded anywhere, they have nothing. If they come back like this, call us." "I figured," I said, "but I didn't think they'd call you on me like I was the problem." "They do that," he said. "We get a lot of calls where it turns out the caller just needs a boundary explained." He gave the gate a pat. "Install a second lock if you haven't. Document everything. Keep it boring. Boring wins." Harper, who'd stayed through the whole conversation without interrupting, an Olympic feat for her, finally spoke. "You know they've been talking about this for a while," she said to me. "I've been hearing about it at the dog park. Mitzi wants the association to look like it owns the whole street." "I was afraid of that," I said. "And she's been telling people you agreed," Harper added, sympathy in her eyes. "She said you were on board. People assumed it was true." That stung a bit because I'm not a recluse. I go to the feed store and the school fundraisers. I help if someone's goat gets out or if a tree falls across the road. I'm not interested in being anyone's archvillain, but I'm also not a doormat. After Deputy Lane left, I went back to the porch, took a picture of my gate and the signs, and wrote the date on the back of an envelope with all the details I could remember. Times, cars, the words used. I scanned the invitation and put it in a folder called HOA Nonsense. Then I called Ari, the attorney who handled my closing. He's a straightforward guy who charges by the hour but writes like he's being graded by an old English teacher. No fluff, no ambiguity. "Ari," I said, straight to the point. "The homeowners association across the road tried to hold their anniversary party at my pool. They called the sheriff when I said no. They've been sending me bills and notices. They claim they annexed me. What's the next move?" "Next move," he said, "is we send them a letter. Not a mean one, a clear one. We tell them to cease and desist. We put them on notice that any further attempts to enforce their rules on you constitute interference with your property rights. And we ask them to retract any recorded instrument if they made one. Your deed is clean, but I'll check the recorder's office. If they recorded some nonsense, we'll fix it." The phrase "recorded some nonsense" sat like a pebble in my shoe. "You think they did?" I asked. "I've seen volunteer boards do a lot with a little knowledge," he said. "I'll check." While we were talking, I got a series of texts, unknown number, popping up like woodpecks. "This is a very disappointing start to your membership," one said. Another, "The board finds your lack of cooperation unbecoming." And my favorite, from later in the string, "Per bylaws section 3.2, you are obligated to host when directed." It was like someone had poured legal tone into a blender with self-importance and hit puree. "Document those," Ari said when I told him. "Don't reply." I didn't. Over the next 2 days, it became clear that what happened at the gate wasn't a one-off. I got an email from Community Standards with a list of infractions, including refusal to host community event, appearance of livestock housing, and fence color. My fence is weathered cedar. If that offends someone's aesthetics across the road, that's a them problem. But seeing it listed like I owed them an apology scratched something in me I didn't know had claws. Harper stopped by with banana bread and gossip. "They're furious," she said, setting the loaf down on my counter like it was evidence. "Mitzi says you embarrassed her in front of the sheriff and half the neighborhood. She's planning to handle it at the next meeting." "Handle what?" I asked, breaking a piece of bread and handing it to her. "It's not hers to handle. She's telling people that the board filed documents," Harper said, lowering her voice like maybe the walls were nosy. "Like official ones." I thought of Ari and the recorder's office. My stomach did a curious little loop. "If she filed something with my parcel number on it," I said, "it won't end the way she thinks." Harper took a bite of the bread and made a face that said she knew it, liked it, and wished it didn't have to happen. "You do what you have to," she said. That night, I did what Ari advised, and then some. I scanned every letter and email. I saved every voicemail. I took photos of my posted signs, my gate, the line of the fence. I pulled my deed from the file, read it again, followed the legal description with my finger like it was a treasure map. I printed the plat map that showed the subdivision on the far side of the county road, the clean white gap where my property begins. I made a new folder on my desktop called Annexation Fairy Tale. The next morning, Ari called. "They recorded something," he said without preamble. "A notice of inclusion. Not technically a lien, but they wrote it like they meant people to think so. It's a piece of paper they invented. It cites their bylaws and attaches a membership list. It's filed against your parcel number. It's garbage, but it's in the index now, which means a title search would find it. And that's a problem." I sat down slowly, the couch giving under me like the weight had doubled. "Can they do that?" I asked, even though I knew the answer was, "Sure, they can record a napkin if the clerk doesn't stop them." "They shouldn't," he said. "But clerks record what's presented as long as it meets formatting requirements. They don't check substance. We're going to fix it. I'll draft a demand that they record a release immediately. If they don't, we'll file a petition to quiet title and ask for fees. Also, based on the language they used, we might look at slander of title, because this could cloud your ownership. It's not about vengeance, it's about making sure they never do it again." "I like the sound of never again," I said. "And I admit a little vengeance wouldn't hurt my feelings," he chuckled, the first light note in 2 days. "I know," he said, "but we keep it boring and correct. That's how you win." Ari's letter went out that afternoon, certified mail and email both, and a courtesy copy to the management company address. Because I learned they had contracted with a manager despite previously insisting they were a pure volunteer outfit. The letter used the kind of words that make people sit up straight: unlawful, improper, immediate, retract, demand, damages. And it cited the statutes that allow a property owner to recover costs when someone records a false claim against their title. 2 hours after the letter landed, my phone pinged with a new email from Sable. The subject line was "Courtesy Notice," which made me roll my eyes before I opened it. The body of the email was a single paragraph with the confidence of a high schooler, with a freshly laminated hall pass. Per Section 1.1 and 1.3 of the Community Bylaws, the board has authority to annex adjacent properties and enforce compliance. The association will not be intimidated by legal posturing. Please abide by the community's decisions. Your cooperation is expected. I forwarded it to Ari. He replied, "Good. They put their misunderstanding in writing. We didn't have to wait long to see how they'd handle it." 2 nights later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Open forum tonight. Your attendance is mandatory." I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, "If you don't attend, the board will proceed without your input." I didn't reply to that either. Then the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a clipboard in a polo shirt, someone I'd seen walking the cul-de-sac with a tape measure, standing on my porch, pen in hand. "We need your signature," he said, like it was a normal request. "For what?" I asked. He tapped his form. "An acknowledgement that you've been notified about the annexation." "I acknowledge I've been notified of your attempt," I said, keeping my hands in my pockets. "I'm not signing anything. It's just a notice," he said, "not agreeing, just noticed." "I noticed the time," I said. "It's dinner, you're trespassing, please leave." He looked as if he'd been denied the bathroom after a long drive. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," he said. And I almost laughed at how we'd slipped into a script. "The easy way," I said, "is you get off my porch." He left, but not with good grace. As he walked down the steps, he muttered, "Everyone else manages to be neighborly." That night, after it got quiet and the crickets started filing their little reports, I sat on the gazebo bench and thought about how ridiculous it was that a group of strangers believed they had the right to fold my land into their rules, like it was a sock that rolled away from the dryer. It would have been funny if it weren't dangerous. Because bogus or not, a recorded claim could spook a lender or a buyer down the line. It could cost me time and money even if I won. And I knew that if I didn't push back hard now, I'd be spending this summer and next swatting at one notice after another like mosquitoes. A day later, the HOA sent a bill with a red stamp that read, "Final notice before action." The line items included quarterly dues, legal fee allocation, and, I kid you not, event repositioning costs. They'd apparently charged me for the trouble of having to move their anniversary party. I held the paper up to the kitchen window to see if it looked more legitimate when backlit. It did not. I called Ari. "They're escalating," I said, "and they're billing me for their party." "Good," he said. "We'll escalate too. I'll file the petition to quiet title and include a request for a temporary restraining order preventing further enforcement action pending resolution. Also, I'm sending a copy of the letter and their notice of inclusion to the state's Consumer Protection Division. This sort of thing lands badly for volunteer boards when it crosses the line into unfair trade practices." "You think they realize how deep they are?" I asked. "Not yet," he said, "but they will." 2 hours later, a pickup slowed near my mailbox and someone reached out to stick an envelope in. I walked down and retrieved it. No stamp, of course. Inside was a flyer for an emergency board meeting and a handwritten note. "We are trying to do this the nice way. Don't make us do it the other way." Not a threat exactly, but not a threat. Harper called that night. "It's getting messy," she said. "Rachel down the street told me people are afraid of you suing the whole neighborhood." "I'm not suing anyone who doesn't deserve it," I said. "I'm just protecting my land." "I know," she said. "It's just Mitzi's good at turning people into the villain if they don't do what she wants." I took a slow breath. "Then I guess I'll have to be okay with being the villain in her story," I said, "if it means I'm the hero in mine." I didn't go to their emergency meeting. Ari told me not to, and besides, my presence would be nothing but kindling for whatever rhetorical bonfire Mitzi planned to light. But people talk, and word travels faster on a cul-de-sac than a horsefly in August. What came back to me through two different neighbors was this. Mitzi stood up in a crowded garage and announced that the association had successfully expanded to include my farm and that I'd tried to sabotage the anniversary. She used the word unneighborly 5 times by one count and threatened to pursue every remedy. When someone asked if they had a signed agreement from me, she said, "No, but we have a moral one. Moral agreements do not run with the land." While they were talking in circles, Ari filed the petition with the county court. He attached the notice of inclusion and the emails and the texts and the invitation flyer with "hosted at the pool and gazebo," circled in red like a teacher's correction. He also attached a sworn statement from me that I'd never consented to join, and copies of my deed and the plat map, because judges like maps that show lines as much as men with tractors do. The clerk stamped it, the judge signed the temporary restraining order, and a process server handed it to Mitzi on her front step the next afternoon. The restraining order was straightforward. The association, its officers, and its agents were prohibited from taking any action to enforce any bylaw or rule against me, or to represent that my property was subject to their authority until the court decided otherwise. It also ordered them to record a notice of the order with the county recorder so anyone pulling my parcel index could see it. Paper cuts both ways. I didn't see Mitzi get served, but I heard about it from 3 people within an hour, because that's how fast justice on a piece of paper can travel in a neighborhood that thrives on updates. All that day, cars drove by slower than usual. People rubbernecking like the rooster weather vane on my barn had been replaced with a UFO. I waved at some of them. A few waved back. Most didn't. That night, with crickets tuning up and the cows folding into the grass, I stood by the pool under my string lights and pictured 100 strangers splashing here, using my bathroom, trampling my bricks. The joke had turned serious. I promised myself I wouldn't flinch. In the morning, Sable emailed a revised membership list removing my parcel, adding, "Pending resolution of legal matters, the association will pause enforcement as a courtesy. No apology. Just a pause dressed up as grace." I forwarded it to Ari. He replied, "Good, but we're not done." We weren't. In the recorder's stack he pulled, a notice of inclusion came with a page labeled Owner Acknowledgement. My name stood there in a stiff, upright hand. Mine leans. The date matched the day I was at a stock sale. The notary stamp belonged to a board volunteer. Cold clarity settled. Stubbornness is a personality. Forgery is a crime. Ari told me not to contact anyone and to meet him at the sheriff's office. I packed my deed, the restraining order, that glossy invitation claiming my pool and gazebo were graciously offered, plus a gas receipt and wristband from the sale. Paper is proof, so are the odd artifacts you keep when you learn that fairness likes receipts. Deputy Lane met us at the county building. I laid out pages like cards. He copied the notary's commission number and said, 2 issues, a notary acting outside duty and a potential false instrument for filing. Maybe forgery, I need your statement. I swore out the timeline and signed my leaning signature. 2 days later, Lane called me back. The notary, Trent, admitted he stamped the page at Mitzi's request, hadn't seen me, hadn't checked ID, and used my name from the property records so it would look official. The clerk had recorded the document because format, not content, gets checked. Now it sat in the index like a burr. Lane said he would recommend charges: unlawful notarial act, offering a false instrument, and possibly forgery. Ari's verdict was simple. You kept it boring, that matters. Life continued, feeding cattle, fixing a sprinkler piper assaulted, accepting Harper's casserole. Ari mailed a letter to every homeowner with the restraining order attached. It explained the boundary line, the false filing, and warned that the association's insurance might not cover intentional acts. If you're concerned about exposure, it ended, attend the next meeting. They did. The garage meeting moved to the small park. I stayed home. Absence can be louder than presence. Harper reported pointed questions, a deflated management rep, and the moment a quiet neighbor named Theo stood and said, "I move for a recall." People signed, proxies appeared, and a special meeting was set. Before the recall, the county attorney filed charges. A short press note named Trent and Mitzi. The neighborhood learned adjectives aren't law, statutes are. Mitzi called me. "You made this adversarial," she said. I said no, I replied. No is a boundary. She asked what I wanted. I told her a recorded release and public correction, reimbursement of my fees, a bylaw change requiring unanimous written consent for any expansion, and a donation to 4-H equal to whatever they spent on that magnetic event coordination sign. 2 days later, the recall happened. Mitzi out, Sable out, Theo interim, Harper texted. That night, Theo emailed, "I'm sorry, can we meet?" We met at the library. Theo, Treasurer Lila, their attorney Marcus, across from Aries folders. Aries set out non-negotiables. Record a release, send a member letter, reimburse fees, amend bylaws to bar any annexation, require board training on legal limits, and promise no events or access without my written consent. Marcus called it reasonable and asked to include a short primer about what covenants can and can't do. Theo, embarrassed but steady, agreed. They followed through. The association recorded a release of erroneous claim, mailed members a map and primer explaining that covenants don't cross property lines without consent, reimbursed my fees, amended the bylaws, and adopted training. They also sponsored the 4-H Showmanship Award for 3 years with a banner reading, "Community means consent." The criminal cases resolved quietly. Trent pled to the notary and filing charges, lost his commission, paid a fine, and taught Saturday Forms 101 at the library as community service. He told me he thought he was helping. Mitzi pled to offering a false instrument, paid a fine, did service, and agreed to stay off any HOA board for 3 years. The judge told her, "Good intentions don't pave over other people's rights." That line sits on my fridge. Insurance denied coverage for intentional acts, so the association paid from reserves and a small assessment. Meetings returned to useful boredom. Budgets, park grass, holiday lights. Vendors handled their dispute with the HOA without me. A real estate agent stopped using my pool as brochure bait. I sponsored a county extension workshop on property lines and easements at the library. The attorney opened with, "Maps and words are promises. You can't tie a new promise to someone else's land without their hand." No one asked about my pool, which felt like the best compliment. Life settled. Theo showed up with sparkling water and asked if a student could hold a car wash in the roadside turnout outside my fence. With tarps and permits, yes. The kids waved signs, kept off my grass, and left me a thank you card full of leaning signatures. The civil case ended with quiet title. Any claim by the association is void ab initio. Ari framed it. I hosted a small dinner, family, Harper, and Theo, under the gazebo lights. We toasted not victory, but boundaries. A padded envelope arrived with a magnet. Community means consent. Under it, maps and words are promises. It lives on my fridge beside the judge's line. Now, when someone asks how it ended, I say, quieter, better. Boundaries take maintenance. And if memory ever slips across the road, I've got the copies, the contacts, and the calm. A month later, I drove past the park and saw kids chalk a map. Houses, park, a big square labeled "Farm with the Dog." The word "no" with a smiley face. They already understood the neighborhood's most important legend. I drove home, opened my gate, and the sign, "Welcome if invited," caught the late light like the most hospitable boundary in the world. Friends, thank you. See you soon.